Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. You wouldn't treat your worst enemy the way the National Para Athletics Championship has behaved with India's differently abled athletes. They were forced to sleep on the floor, bath and defecate in the open, and there were no special facilities like ramps. But has this evoked the outrage it should have? And does it reveal the shameful way India responds to the differently abled? My guests are the well-known columnist and commentator Akar Patel, former world billiards champion Michael Ferreira, the sports advisor of the Hindustan Times Pradeep magazine, and table tennis player and disabled rights activist Pradeep Raj. Akar Patel, first the Times of India and then all national television channels have revealed the disgusting conditions in which differently abled athletes were hosted at the National Para Athletics Championship. They were forced to sleep on the floor, bath and defecate in the open, and there were no special facilities like ramps. What words would you use to describe this situation?
I would say it's normal. I think in a nation where words like Langda, Lula, Kana are nicknames, where we tend to look at people through their handicaps without much sympathy, and I mean all of us, not just the government, this is only to be expected. I think that we ought not to be surprised that there was very little facility available for people who needed it, and I don't think that there was any sort of thinking that went on in the background of calling so many people together in one place. And I doubt whether anybody gave it a thought on what these people needed or whether they were special in any way. I'm not at all surprised. I'm not even outraged. I don't think that this thing will stop. I think the next games next year will be quite similar. I think there is a second aspect to this. I don't think we should be viewing this purely through the prism of their disability. This is the way it is in every sports event. You and I have been to sports events outside of our cities when we were young. It was no different even when we were enabled physically. Other than our hallowed cricket team, nobody really gets good facilities in India.
You know, Pradeep Raj, there was a large element of deliberate tongue-in-cheek comment there from Akar Patel. But as someone who is differently abled yourself, were you surprised and shaken by what you saw on television, what you read in the Times of India yesterday? Or do you agree that this is precisely how the differently abled are treated by India? That it may be shocking when it becomes public, but this is how people like you have to live your lives. Pradeep, can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me? Did you hear that question?
Yes, sir. सर कैन यू प्लीज दोबारा से सर थोड़ा
जी जरूर मैं ये पूछ रहा था कि do you believe that what you saw on TV yesterday is shocking and disgusting?
Yes, sir.
Or is this how people like you have had to live their lives?
Yes, sir.
That we are surprised because we haven't realized it, but this is a reality for you.
यस सर, मैं सबसे पहले बताना चाहूँगा कि जिस तरह से ये अपने आप को बचाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि इनके पास फंड्स की प्रॉब्लम थी, तो मेरा सबसे बड़ा पहले क्वेश्चन ये है कि अगर आपके पास फंड नहीं था तो आप इतने बड़े इवेंट के लिए गए क्यों? और मैं उसके बाद ये बताना चाहता हूँ कि ये कह रहे हैं कि इनको स्पोर्ट्स मिनिस्ट्री ने कोई फंड नहीं किया है। मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ 2006, 7, 8, 9 हर नेशनल इवेंट्स के लिए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्पोर्ट्स ने इनको 5 लाख रुपए से ज्यादा का फंड किया है। तो ये सिर्फ एक बहाना है और बचने की कोशिश है पैरालंपिक कमेटी ऑफ इंडिया की। और ये पहली बार नहीं हुआ है सर, ये बेंगलोर में जितने भी इन्होंने इवेंट्स कराए हैं इसी तरीके के ये अरेंजमेंट प्रोवाइड कराते हैं एथलीट्स को, क्योंकि यहाँ पर ये दिल्ली एनसीआर में था और ये मीडिया की पकड़ में आ गया, इस वजह से ये हाईलाइट हुआ है। अदरवाइज ये बेंगलोर में होता या कहीं होता तो इतना हाईलाइट नहीं होता और इसी तरह से सब कुछ चलता रहता।
Michael Ferreira, after the Times of India broke this horrible story yesterday on its front page, Sports Minister Sabanand Sonowal tweeted that he has asked for a detailed report from the Paralympics Committee of India. But as far as I can tell, that's the only reaction from the government. It's the only reaction from the minister. It's the only reaction from anyone in the Modi government. Is that anywhere like the sort of response you expect? Is it anywhere close to adequate?
Absolutely not. You know, Karan, I think the whole issue basically stems from the fact that no one gives a damn about the Paralympics, the para-athletes or the differently abled athletes. It's not a glamour event. They are not glamour boys. No one gives a damn. And you know, if you're going to hold a championship of the stature of the national championship of the country, there should have been a dummy run done by the PCI, the organizers. They should have gone ahead, seen whether everything was in order, like all of us did when we were in administration, sussed out the situation, and plugged the gaps and the leaks wherever possible. This was not done. And every national championship is funded by the sports ministry or by the government or whichever arm of the government to a certain extent. I know that in my game it was 10 lakhs. Perhaps it was less for the Paralympics, although it shouldn't be. Now, were these funds made available or not? One of the defects in this system is that the government does not advance the funds. They give you the funds after the event is over and you've shown what you've done. This, I think, needs urgent review, because funds are the very lifeblood of sport.
So the money must be made available up front.
Yeah, review the system and monitor it very, very strictly. Also, in the case of the less glamorous sports, and I use the word sadly, there should be a strict monitoring either by the SAI with an overview by the sports ministry. This should be a given. This should be written into the system.
Pradeep Magazine, you heard Michael Ferreira begin by referring, in fact, to the Paralympics Committee and how they should have monitored this, done a dummy run. Now, in fact, yesterday in the Times of India, when they broke the story, Rajesh Tomar, the president of the Paralympics Committee of India, claims that he was aware that the games were poorly organized and managed, but he blames this on the organizing secretary. But the amazing thing is that you discover from that article that he made these statements without visiting the venue, and he'd presumably never been to the venue because otherwise he'd have seen what the situation was like, and secondly, without any personal knowledge of the situation. Now, isn't that, from the president of the Paralympics, another example of gross irresponsibility?
Look, I checked the website of this association, PCI, and Mr. Tomar is highlighted there. He's an IRS officer. He's not somebody who's insignificant. He knows, and his administrative qualities are there, written as mentioned as something which he's bringing this to this kind of an association. So obviously, he has not cared, and I will go with Akar Patel. You know, we have hierarchies in this country. It's not just to do with, we don't care for our poorer people, we don't care for our, like, we have a caste structure. So in this hierarchy, differently abled athletes, like it's a system where probably these people think they are obliging them by this very fact that by even bringing them there. It's a very shocking, shameful, another episode of the way we treat people.
Akar Patel, in my introduction I said, or I asked the question, is this a national shame that hasn't quite shamed the nation? Do you believe that this is the sort of thing we not only take in our stride, but we leave aside no guilt about, we often don't care about it?
Well, I don't think we feel a sense of shame over this. I don't think we have the conscience to be able to look at somebody who has been born with a handicap with any sort of sympathy. There is no sympathy in the way that we look at such people. And as I told you, our nicknames for them reveal that. There's a very famous kababi in Lucknow called Tunde, which means somebody with no arms. Though I don't know whether he'll last very long given the ban on beef over the country. But I'm saying that is a reflection of the way we are as people, that we tend to look at physical disability purely through the deformation of it. We have very little sympathy for the individual, and we are not able to see the individual. I don't think these games have got the attention that they should have got, because I think the media is totally disinterested, and rightly so, because the readership doesn't care. And for us to be able to spend so much time on prime time, which is what this is very valuable. It's a great thing. I don't think it normally happens. It does happen in newspapers. These games would have passed unmentioned in all the newspapers had this not happened.
In fact,
what passed...
Carry on, please finish.
What passed as an episode of injustice, frankly, is what brought this to the front pages. Had this not happened, we would not have noticed the poor treatment or the lack of facility that these people have had to go through, and
Okay.
it would have been totally normal. I don't think next year will be in any way different.
You know, Michael Ferrer, I want to pick up on a point made there by Akar Patel, that in fact this episode hasn't got the attention in the media it deserves. And the truth is that I checked all the papers today. It's not a front page story in the following major papers. Mark my words, not a front page story in the Express, the Hindu, the Hindustan Times, the Asian Age, the Tribune and the Pioneer. And even in the Times of India, which broke this as a scoop yesterday, it barely today gets 2 inches on the front page. In other words, having broken it, the media feels no responsibility, concern or interest in continuing and following up. Doesn't that in a sense underline that we as a nation simply don't care? Leave aside not feeling guilty, we don't even have any qualms.
This underscores precisely my point. There is an enormous distortion in our sports setup. I have fulminated on this issue many a times in the past, to the extent that I've been branded a cricket hater. I'm not a cricket hater. I love the game and I follow it avidly. But the distortion that Akar said something about, it's not worth, or words to that effect, spending time on events like this because they don't generate readership and the readers themselves are not interested. This is the distortion that has been created. And I think if the media has any sense of responsibility, it is up to them to change this. The appetite grows by what it feeds on, according to Shakespeare. So if a little more is thrown, to give you a case in point, years ago there was never.
The actual quotation from Shakespeare leads to the opposite conclusion. He says, "Give me, if music be the food of love, play on, give me more of it, so the appetite may surfeit, sicken and die."
Well done, Karan.
Not feed, but die. Don't quote Shakespeare. He doesn't support you here. But I take your point. This is a job the media needs to highlight, and this is a job the media needs to enforce. And in fact, I want to put this to you, Pradeep. Do you feel the Indian people, having watched this on television, having read about it at least on the front page of the Times of India yesterday, feel outraged? Or do they think that the national response is actually way below what it should be and what you would have hoped it would be?
It obviously is way below, but if there had to be an outrage, if there has to be an outrage, then it should have come long time back. See, this is another episode in the way we, as I said earlier, we treat hierarchies. For us, hierarchies matter, and the lower the rung you are, you don't matter. The outrage, as Akar rightly said, the news of, we haven't, like I'm part of the media, we didn't care about these athletes who were taking part there. They're aspiring to participate for, say,
the media itself is guilty of an irresponsible neglect.
Absolutely.
In other words, we should begin not by pointing.
These are the TRP ratings which decide the television debates or the newspaper reports.
So we shouldn't, as anchors and as journalists, point fingers at politicians or at society. We should begin by pointing fingers at ourselves.
Absolutely. We should question ourselves that why don't we highlight these kind of things far more than we normally do.
Pradeep ji, मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहता हूँ. We're talking about the deliberate, conscious neglect of society. You live as a differently abled person. How difficult is it for you? You have to face up to this neglect every single day. How difficult is it for you?
सर, मैं एग्री करता हूं सर के साथ बिल्कुल. निगलेक्ट किया जाता है मीडिया के द्वारा, सोसाइटी के द्वारा. जब कोई एक्सीडेंट हो जाता है, इंसिडेंट हो जाता है, मीडिया सिर्फ जब आती है डिसेबिलिटी को पूछने के लिए. अदरवाइज कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो, कुछ भी हो, चाहे हमारे डिसेबिलिटी राइट बिल की बात हो, पैरालंपिक की बात हो, या किसी भी तरह की बात हो, मीडिया आगे नहीं आता है. मुझे इस चीज़ का थोड़ा सा दुख, इस बात का दुख है. अभी मैं अगर पैरालंपिक कमेटी ऑफ इंडिया की बात करूं, हम इनको आरटीआईज लगाते हैं, मेरे पास यहाँ पे रखी हुई हैं. मैं पिछले 4 साल से आरटीआईज कर रहा हूं और 20 से ज़्यादा सीआईसी हेयरिंग कर चुका हूं पीसीआई के साथ. लेकिन ये किसी भी बात का कोई आंसर नहीं देते हैं. ये अकाउंटेबिलिटी नहीं है इनके अंदर. दे डोंट अंडरस्टैंड डिसेबिलिटी, दे डोंट अंडरस्टैंड डिसेबिलिटी लॉ. What is the problem of persons with disability? How can move wheelchair user? ये किसी तरह से डिसेबिलिटी को नहीं समझते हैं. मैं सिर्फ यही रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहूँगा सर्बानंद सोनोवाल जी के पास कि आप इनको तुरंत सस्पेंड करें और इनके खिलाफ इंक्वायरी बिठाई जाए और इसका पूरा इनकी इंक्वायरी करके इनके जो ऑफिशियल्स हैं उनके खिलाफ इंक्वायरी कर इनके ऊपर एक्शन किया जाए.
Very quickly, Akar Patel, we've been talking about the utter irresponsible silence from ministers, from society, from journalists. But this would have been an ideal opportunity for the opposition to score points against the government. It's the sort of thing the opposition dreams of. But I haven't heard a single Congress leader, leave aside Sonia Gandhi, comment on this. And to be honest, I haven't heard anyone from the left, from Trinapool, Samajwadi Party, JDU, from anywhere. It's almost as if even opposition politicians don't believe this is something they could usefully bash the government with.
We must not expect too much competence from the Congress. But in this instance, I think the government is only partially responsible. Much as I would like to hang it for this episode, I don't think it is entirely responsible, given the fact that the body that has managed this or mismanaged this, so to speak, is not part of the government. I'll just go back to a point on the media that was made. I don't think that the disabled athlete is looking for charity. I don't think that he or she is expecting the media to play up incidents and episodes outside of the playing field so much as within it. And I think that that hasn't happened because I don't think the kind of heroism we associate with sport has happened in this specific field. I think it needs to happen. It happened with Kabaddi last year. And it didn't happen with Kabaddi for 50 years before that. So it can happen. I don't think that what they want is the media to stop and put down what they're doing and focus on them alone. I think what they want is the sort of event that will bring life to the kind of sweat and blood that they've put into their sport. And I think that that day is not very far off.
Okay.
So far as the politics of this goes, I'm not so sure if the government is to be blamed here. I think that society and its insensitivity, which is visible and manifest in everything. I have never worked personally in an office space which went out of its way to make itself friendly to the disabled. And I don't think that we ever have had a policy in the 5 big newspapers that I've worked for, where we ever had a policy of having some sort of jobs given to them. So I think that this is more than just something that we can pin on the government. We need to look at our society. I think as a people we need to read this story and feel shame rather than ask the government what they did or didn't do about it.
Michael Ferreira, my apologies for breaking your flow with that cheeky interruption a little earlier. But I want to ask you this. As someone who has a lot of insight, not just into sport and sport administration, but also human beings, how do we start to ensure this never happens again?
Well, like I said, there are a few things that we need to put in place. Identify the less glamorous sports. Let the sports ministry or the SAI set into place a kind of manualization of actions whenever important championships are held, including the national championship, one of which obviously is to suss out the venue, to make sure that all the necessary facilities are available. Secondly, get the officials who are conducting the affair to stay in the same premises as the athletes. And then, like I say, tweak the rules regarding funding of the championships by the ministry. And I just want to add
very quickly,
yes, very quickly, that it's ironical, isn't it? I was on a program yesterday with Shaina NC. She said the government feels that specially abled athletes are the highest priority. It certainly doesn't look like it from this latest example.
You know, there was a point there made by Michael Ferreira. If sports officials are required to live in the same accommodation, presumably they would ensure the accommodation was up to the standards they demand for themselves. Do you think that is a little trick that we need to enforce? All sports officials will live with the athletes in precisely the same conditions as the athletes.
Well, that could be one of the conditions put. But I'm sure the government here, because they fund this national championship, the money must have been provided by the government because they fund these national championships. And they today, since there has been this kind of a coverage, which rarely happens, they should crack down and, as Michael is pointing out, put out certain do's and don'ts, which would help that this kind of things are not repeated.
Do you think the sports minister should have had the moral duty, and I emphasize the word moral duty, to actually speak publicly rather than just tweet?
I think after what he read, he should have gone there himself. He should have made it a point. Ghaziabad is not somewhere far off. He could have gone there. It would have got it greater notice, and he could have said whatever he had to say right there and this thing, that this kind of a thing should not be tolerated.
And the fact that he didn't go there suggests that even for him,
he obviously didn't care. It's just that because he must have read in the papers, people must have asked him what is this, and he must have felt forced to tweet or say these kind of a thing.
Pradeep, we have only 30 seconds. Today, everyone is either expressing moral outrage or they're sharply critical of what this reveals of Indian society, Indian values, and us Indian people. Do you think things will change, or do you think that's unlikely?
जैसा कि कल मंत्री जी ने 24 घंटे का समय दिया था, लेकिन अभी तक 24 घंटे से ज़्यादा बीत चुके हैं, लेकिन अभी तक इनके ऊपर कोई एक्शन नहीं हुआ है। सिर्फ बातें ही करते हैं, करते कुछ नहीं है। चाहे कॉमनवेल्थ गेम्स हो, चाहे लास्ट एशियन गेम्स का स्कैम हो पीसीआई के द्वारा, मंत्री जी हमेशा इनको शोकॉज नोटिस इशू कर देते हैं, लेकिन करते कुछ भी नहीं है। उसके बावजूद हम उनसे मिलना चाहते हैं, हम उनको अपनी बातें बताना चाहते हैं, हर इवेंट से पहले उनको प्रॉब्लम्स बताना चाहते हैं, लेकिन वो मिलने के लिए रेडी नहीं होते हैं। तो सबसे बड़ा इशू यही है कि मंत्री जी इनिशिएटिव लें और इस केस को पर्सनली
And presumably, yes, Pradeep, that means that in fact, even after this, nothing will change. There'll be a lot of talk, a lot of promises, but there'll be no fulfillment of them. And that is a sad indictment of us as people. At the end of the day, this story is not about the government. It's not about sports officials, although it is about both. But this story is truly about us, the Indian people, and our values, and the way we let down ourselves and shame ourselves by our behavior. One cannot be more censorious about ourselves. This points fingers at all of us. Let's hope we learn a lesson. My thanks to my four guests for joining me.